Welcome to the Steering Change Podcast, navigating through the commercial transportation industry in Alberta and beyond. Powered by the Alberta Motor Transport Association. Here's your host, Kelsey Hipkin.
Hello, listeners of Steering Change. My name is Kelsey Hipkin, and I will be your host today. While we're enjoying some lingering warm weather here in Alberta, we know our province can be fickle when it comes to sun, snow, wind, and rain. We can take these warmer days and ensure we're prepared for the snow, the arrival of which is inevitable, by taking the time to make sure we have the tips, tricks, and supplies to be road ready for the winter months. We are changing things up a bit today with more of a roundtable or rapid fire type episode, and I've brought in a few of AMTA's finest subject matter experts on winter preparedness for both commercial transportation and the motoring public. Be sure to hang out after today's episode for the grand finale of our Best Big Rig Movie Ever bracket, as well as the introduction of a new series we'll be launching this fall. I would like to welcome Cliff Litke, Senior Advisor Member Services, Rob Destree, Senior Instructor Driver Development, and Doug Walton, Senior Advisor Member Solutions. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Good morning, Kelsey.
There's a whole lot of senior in there.
Citizens. Mostly citizens. Or almost citizens.
Okay, to start, I'm going to have you all introduce yourselves. Our listeners will be familiar with Cliff and Rob, but we will give a refresh. And Doug, this is your first Steering Change episode, but certainly not your last. So Doug, why don't you kick us off, followed by Cliff, and last but not least, Rob.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. I'm thrilled to be here on my first ever podcast and excited to be a part of the conversation today. Hello, everyone. My name is Doug Walton. I'm the Senior Advisor for our Member Solutions team here at the AMTA. My role is really focused on member engagement. And what that means is I have the privilege of working with an amazing team here at the AMTA who are just all about supporting our members. We get out, we listen to their pain points or challenges. We provide industry guidance in the form of either best practices, possible solutions. And I guess when I say offer solutions, I could mean connecting our members to other subject matter experts within the AMTA that could help with, say, safety and compliance matters, compliance and regulatory affairs, education, or just connecting people with many of our amazing supplier members who can offer products and services to help elevate their business. So really blessed to be a part of the association. And a little story or a little background of myself. I'm new to the AMTA, however, been in the industry for about 27 years. My story is a familiar one that we often hear in our industry, starting off as a driver in the late 90s, running groceries to northern BC and the Yukon. I switched seats in about 2000 and came into the office and started a role in operations. And 20 plus years later, here I am, blessed to be a part of the AMTA and looking forward to giving back to the industry. That has given my family and I a wonderful life. So that's a little bit about me.
That was a lovely introduction. Thank you, Doug. Cliff, tell us about yourself.
How am I supposed to follow that up? Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. Cliff Litke, Senior Advisor of Member Services. Pretty much everything what Doug said, except we're more of the support team for Doug's team. Doug goes out and, like he says, he finds the pain points, and my team is responsible for getting the answers for those pain points. I'm very, very fortunate to work with a fantastic team. They make me look good. I think the best thing that I've ever done was hire Dave Elniski, which everybody that listens to this podcast knows. Very, very integral part to the member services team. Little bit about me, I guess. I'll be quick because people have heard it already. Industry for 37 years. I started in the late 80s loading trailers for my dad's company. Early 90s, got my commercial license and drove truck right up until I drove truck for about 10 years. Just strictly doing city P&D, and then went to school, came out of school, and was in sales for 10 years for some of the larger carriers, Canadian Freightways, Day & Ross, Clark Transport before they were swallowed up. And then for another 10 years after that, I managed a medium-sized carrier here in Edmonton. And almost 6 years at AMTA, I'm able to combine all that experience from really the back end and the front end to support the carriers that need the help. So it's my dream job. I'm living the dream.
Well, we're lucky to have you, Cliff. And Mr. Rob Destree, tell us about yourself. I was going to say,
Cliff is also a remarkably skilled forklift driver too. So it's magic watching him run a forklift. So I became a licensed instructor in June of 1990. So 34 plus years as an instructor. I oversee the PDIC LCV simulator training. I do the videos. I fly the drone. I am the unofficial voice of the AMTA.
I would say official.
Okay.
Very official.
Let's move into the meat and potatoes, fellas. We'll start with commercial transportation. Doug, you mentioned you were a full-time commercial driver in the past. How should carriers and their drivers be preparing for winter roads and conditions?
Yeah, great topic to get, obviously it's timely and we got to look at how to prepare it. Starting off, I guess, from the driver side of things, it's really important. I think we get ready for winter, have our winter gloves, our coveralls, our extra clothing when we get out on our trip. So that journey management is really important to know where you're going. You're checking road conditions, you're planning ahead. Your winter boots, this is an area that can really get dangerous too, if depending on the boots that you're wearing. The soles aren't proper condition for our environment, they turn into hockey pucks. You step out of the truck and next thing you know, you're on your tail. So cleats, winter cleats, or proper soles for your winter boots, warm blankets, portable heat sources, ensuring you have your extra food and water. You never know. Road conditions, we've seen avalanches close roads for many days. So having that extra food and water in the truck is important. Cold weather as well creates stiffness in the joints. And we all know it when you walk out and it's 30 below, you just don't want to move. So warming up, preparing your joints and your body for movement before you're unloading is also another thing that a driver can do to prepare. And then carrying your tools, glad head rubbers, airline fittings, fuel conditioner, airline antifreeze, belts, engine fluids, those kind of things, making sure that you have them under the bunk or with you, and your booster cables, air tanks at the end of your trip, post-trip, draining those air tanks, getting the moisture out of them. Those kind of things are just quick ways to make sure that you're prepared and your vehicle is going to perform for you. From an equipment side, obviously now's the time and we're seeing snow on the top of the hills, so chains, making sure that you're laying them out, checking the size, repairing them if necessary, getting them hung on the truck. If you're going into British Columbia right now, it is mandatory that you have the chains hanging. So those kind of things, wheel reflectors or even high visibility paint on the outside of the wheels of the trailers. Check your mirrors, make sure your wheels are turning. Dragging a set of tires or dragging an axle and burning through a set of tires is very expensive and something that can easily be avoided with just checking your mirrors and highlighting your axles that way. So cold weather obviously creates challenges with dolly legs. So from a maintenance perspective, there's tricks that we've used in the past using a bit of synthetic grease. There's I think a 007 Mobilith grease that you can pour a capful on the top of the legs, and it just loosens up things, helps prevent injuries for your drivers, makes the cranking of the dolly legs a lot easier. Webasto's, those add-on units to your vehicles, making sure that they're ready to go and working. Obviously, heater vans, reefer vans, getting your services ready to go for those cold weathers. Freight's important to keep protected against freezing. So it's the number one way to making sure that you're going to maintain proper temperatures of your freight is make sure your equipment's working. Extension cords, that's the number one thing. Inspect the extension cords, making sure that they're not black or burnt out. Your plugins, performing load tests on your plugins is a great way to make sure that driver shows up and the truck hasn't sat all night and had no power. I've seen that happen before, and it's definitely a real challenge when 20 trucks up against one side of your fence doesn't start. So, and for operations, making sure checking your lighting in your yard. Obviously, we have a reduced daylight in the winter, so ensuring your drivers can see, especially during their pre-trip inspections, they're getting to be able to see what they really need to be looking at. And for those who are operating equipment like rail gates, power tailgate cord, all those things, again, Arctic 15 synthetic hydraulic fluid. We used to use that in our tailgates to make sure that when the temperatures drop, they maintain a smooth operating and they're not drawing on too much power on the batteries and flipping breakers and those kind of things. So those are just a few tricks I can think of that help navigate the winter season. Yeah,
that was awesome, Doug. Finally, Rob, that was a lot of information, but is there anything that you might want to add to that as well?
Doug's list was actually fairly comprehensive. I'll give it a slight lean towards light vehicles. Well, before I do that, so when it comes to blankets, one of the big suggestions with blankets for keeping warm is wool. If you use wool retains up to about 80% of its thermal capacity even when wet. So all you've got is a sleeping bag, then have at it. But know that if you're like out trying to change a tire or something, or you're trying to dig yourself out and you want to kneel on it, kneeling on a sleeping bag versus kneeling on a wool blanket, the wool blanket, even you just shake the stuff off, it'll still stay warm even if it's wet. So there's that. Booster cables are actually not as scary as a lot of people make them out to be. There's a billion different videos online showing how to do them, but basically red to red, black to black, your last connection should be done to a ground terminal somewhere away from the battery if possible. Traction aids, for people who are driving light vehicles, you can get traction ramps, which are, some of them are questionable at best, but a good bag of non-clumping kitty litter will help greatly. If you just drive a little front or rear wheel drive vehicle, you can use that for traction around your drive tires, and only your drive tires. Don't put them on the opposite end. That doesn't really help you much. You can try the floor mat trick. Some people, they're like, oh, use your floor mats for traction. I have never had success using floor mats for traction, ever.
Mm-hmm.
Tow ropes, you can get a nice bungee cord style tow rope, which has a bit of give in it. Again, though, if you're not used to using them, you can create a lot of damage if you do it improperly. So you can get tow ropes, but again, do you have the proper attachment points on your vehicles to use them? I've seen a lot of damage caused by people not knowing how to tow. So there's that. Other than that, no, Doug's was Doug covered pretty much all of it. So
Yeah. There's a couple in there that I'd like just elaborate on with Doug's. One was, in my experience, this is more of a CDP&D application, but also for, line haul drivers probably already know this, but layering your clothing. The one thing that being out when you're working in 30-degree weather, when you're outside, of course, you need to be as warm as possible. But when you get in that cab and you start driving for an hour to your next stop, you don't need all those layers, so they got to come off. That's the one thing that I'd like to promote quite a bit, is layering your clothing. Get a t-shirt, get a long sleeve shirt, get a sweater, a jacket, and then coveralls. You can remove clothing, but if you don't have enough, you're going to be paying for that. Also, work with your dispatch on planning. Proper planning is incredibly important. If you're going to be going out, check the forecast. We all know that weather people lie. But at the same time, it's easy to have proper planning. Just take a look at what the forecast is going to be, and that'll give you a little bit of forethought as far as, should I even be going, for that matter, right? Instead of maybe taking the LCV set, maybe instead of the turnpike, I'll just go single this time because it's supposed to be black ice, that kind of thing. And I know Doug mentioned the chains, and the one thing that in my experience I found is that the last time the guys used the chains, they plunked them in that bucket, put them in the jockey box, and left them. So the next time they go to use those chains 6 months later, and they're all rusted. So Doug made a really good point there, and it's very, very important that prior to your next trip with those chains, pull them out of that bucket if they're not hanging. A lot of people put them in buckets, but just pull them out, lay them out, make sure that they're clean, they're dry, they're not all rusted, and all the links are there, and you don't have to repair anything on the side of the road, because that's not what you want to be doing when it's minus 30 and it's snowing and you're trying to climb Big Smoky just out of Grand Prairie. So, yeah.
Trying to put the chains on at that temperature is tough enough. Trying to repair them before putting them on in that temperature, it makes it even more challenging.
Right, yeah.
Or you're not packing a chain tool and a cutoff wheel?
Right?
Okay, shifting gears a bit. See what I did there? Rob, you did touch on this a little bit, but we're going to have a little more focus on the motoring public. What sorts of things, other than what you have already mentioned, should drivers be having in their vehicles in the way of winter preparedness?
I'm going to tag on to what Cliff said about getting your trip and whatnot planned. 511 Alberta is a great resource.
Yeah.
Because you can go into 511 Alberta and see what the road conditions are like. You can see what roads are closed, if there's collisions and whatnot. Waze on your vehicles, those people who have Waze is a decent little app, which will also give you some updates about what's coming up as well. In BC, you've got Drive BC, their website, same thing. I don't know if Saskatchewan must have something, right? Does anyone know if Saskatchewan has something? Okay. I wasn't sure. I don't go to Saskatchewan that often.
We'll confirm that in the show notes.
Okay. And in terms of journey management, let someone know where you're going, when you're leaving, and check in at regular times. Right. So we used to do that. Our normal check-ins were every 2 hours, but in the wintertime, it went down to every hour. If our score on a trip was high, like too high, then you were required to find alternate means. And for one of my coworkers, that meant leaving a truck in Fort Mac and flying back. And we went back and got the truck in the spring because, again, the risk was deemed too high by the geomarket manager. So you're not driving the truck back at that point.
Wow.
I like how you pointed out that, that decision was made for the safety of your people, right? Or those folks, and I think that's an area that I just wanted to touch on is that, the stop work is important to keep in mind. So if you're traveling down the road and the weather is turning on you and you're feeling like you're not confident, the road conditions worsening, no load behind you is worth your life or the risk of injury or loss of life to anyone in the motoring public. So you have a responsibility to pull over, call your dispatch, let them know what's going on, and take that time to grab a couple hours rest. And maybe the snow plows are coming through, or sanding crews are out to make conditions or they improve, right? And that's important. And I think all companies, dispatchers, all your frontline need to be able to support that decision of your driver. It's really up to them to make that call. You need to be supporting that. So I'm just glad to hear that decision you mentioned there, Rob, was made and the risk was mitigated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our journey management program was pretty intense. This is oil and gas days. So you had to score like what time is the trip between midnight and 5 a.m. were banned. Did you get enough rest? How long since your last shift? What kind of vehicle? Is anyone going with you? Are you in convoy? Etc. They took it to the nth degree because, again, when you have a company that's 135,000 odd people, even if only 0.5% of your people have incidents, that's still a few hundred people getting into trouble. So ELDs, in my mind, made that a lot easier too, because then you can track the vehicle. And ours were satellite based in some cases. So if you got into an area where you did have trouble, but there's no cell phone coverage, you could just hit the panic button and then go back and forth with messaging. So for people who don't like ELDs, I love them. I mean, they're a fantastic way of tracking what's going on and can be quite helpful in dire circumstances.
So we've covered clothing. We've done a pretty good job with the exterior of the vehicle, my kitty litter. What else do I need in the vehicle with me?
To go with what Doug said about food, a protein-based food, because as much as I would like to take a big bag of chocolate bars with me, that's generally not the best bet when you're stuck in the middle of nowhere. Trail mix, something that's got a decent amount of fiber in it. Well, not too much fiber, because then you have the other problem. But
so you're saying take toilet paper with you, Rob?
I was going to say, can I make a joke about tube socks?
That's great.
I actually have toilet paper in my vehicle. I have
so
little rolls, right?
Yeah.
So you never know. You never know when you got to go. But yeah, slow release proteins, beef jerky, for example, anything that's going to take a while to digest that gives you a nice even level of energy. Not, again, the big bag of M&Ms.
But you could as well.
You could, yeah.
I'm all over that.
Yeah, get in chocolate ice cream.
Oh.
Tell me about candles. What's the importance of candles?
Candles do a couple things. If you're appropriately dressed and have blankets, they can give you just enough heat energy to stave off, hopefully, frostbite. There's also that psychological effect too with candles being a light source and keeping you because if you're sitting there in the dark shivering, it can be a bit hard on the psyche. But you got a nice little candle going there. You can get your hands nearby it. That can help. But also to go with your candles, they should be in something that's fairly safe, like a can that's not going to tip over easily. And waterproof matches are generally your best bet. Lighters are okay, but lighters over time, if you don't check them, they can drain fluid very, very slowly. Since you brought up that as well, that made me think flashlights. Flashlights are a big thing. At any given point, there's probably 3 or 4 flashlights in my vehicle. Mag lights are awesome. Some of them do a strobe effect if you're broken down, but also those headlights, the $20, $25 headlights that you can wear on the strap on your head. If you've ever tried to change a tire or done something outside in the dark and whatnot, and you're holding your iPhone in one hand while you try to undo a lug nut or pop a cap off the nuts, it's just, $20. And spare batteries to go with them. They're cheap.
Okay, Rob, I'm going to stay with you as someone else had mentioned this, but I want to go a little more in depth about snowplows. You used to operate snowplows. Can you tell us some important takeaways when it comes to sharing the road with them?
Yeah, I ran plows here in Calgary for a season, and there's a lot going on when you're operating a plow. Not only are you making sure that you're pushing snow in the right direction, the blade's in the right position, you're sanding the right amount, but you're also going way slower than the rest of the traffic. way slower. Okay, we were maxed out. We're allowed to go a maximum of 60 kilometers an hour plowing something like Stony Trail or Deerfoot Trail here in Calgary. And at that speed, the truck just bounces back and forth. So you were typically 45 to 50 for a comfortable speed. So if you can imagine, it's a reasonable day out on Stony Trail and everybody's trying to do 80 or 90. And there you are trying to clean up a shoulder, clean up a lane, and you're doing, half that speed. Just be careful. Plow trucks they won't go anywhere near as fast as you are. If you see a giant cloud of snow ahead of you moving down the roadway, likely inside that cloud of snow is a plow truck. And we partnered with Volker earlier this year and did a couple of videos on snowplow safety. And if you watch the second one we did in the series, you'll see what happens with the whiteout conditions when a plow truck hits a snowdrift. Again, if you're behind it and you have no idea if the guy's braking to do a turnaround, you don't know if he's slowing down because there's something ahead of him, just give them space. And when we talk to the snowplow operators, their biggest thing is be patient and give them space to do their job, right? Again, yeah, you might be backed up behind them for 5 or 10 minutes and then finally you get an opportunity to pass. But I've been passed by people on the shoulder while I was plowing in that direction.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm pushing snow into the left side in the median, trying to clean up the left lane, and a guy goes by me on the median shoulder and then calls in to complain about his cracked windshield. It's like, dude, I don't know what to tell you, man. Don't pass a plow on the side it's plowing to, right? You have no idea what's like. You take a chunk of ice. I've accidentally launched snow onto a guy's windshield because he tried to come around to me on the right side when I was pushing to the right. So that it didn't pass me after that once 100 pounds of snow hits his hood. But again, be patient. Give him room to work.
And Doug and or Cliff, can you guys touch on like when you're in the cab of a commercial vehicle coming up on a snowplow, what's it like for you guys?
Well, it's really similar. When I was trucking up north, you would be driving, it's nighttime, and all of a sudden you'd see the weather start to change in front of you rapidly and the snow doing swirls, and you're like, geez, what's going on? All of a sudden, boom, there's a snowplow, right? Sometimes those lights get plugged up with snow. The visibility isn't as crisp. And that's another point we can talk about too, is during your roadside inspections of your truck, get out, do the circle check, clear your taillights off, right? Sometimes you get into those storms and it doesn't take long to pack, your rear taillights up with snow. So clearing those off will help, give you that visibility. But yeah, no, certainly snowplows can come up on you real quick. And when you start to see, like Rob explained, that swirling of that cloud of snow building really quickly, chances are, there's someone in front of you doing some road work. So
yeah, on that note, when you talk about doing the taillights, I mean, every time you got off the main road and you were going to do your turnaround, you had to stop and get out with the snow brush and clean them out, especially the LED taillights. They were just horrible for keeping clean. Yeah. But to go on with that as well, the blue lights that we've been championing here make a big difference too, I find. So yellow and red means snowplow ahead was the common saying, but if you're seeing the blue strobes as well, again, I find they penetrate the snow a little bit better. Watch for the yellow and red or the yellow and blue.
That's a key thing to know for tow trucks as well, but that's going to be another episode down the road. So learning about snowplows, learning about driving, these are all scenarios that are included in our AMTA simulator. Rob, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's one of those things that we can work on with the sim. I was out in Brooks last week working with the county drivers out there, getting them a little refresher, talk about some of the things like, pulling in blades and parked cars and the problems that are associated with plowing at night, for example. So yeah, we can run that. We have the tow plow simulator in there as well. So that's not really commonly used in Alberta. There's only a couple of road maintenance facilities that actually have the tow plow, but the tow plow, while we're on that subject, we do have a tow plow here in Calgary, for example. So the truck might be in the center lane, but there may be a plow swung over into the right lane because the trailer will articulate off to the right side and he can plow the lane next to it. And it's lit up like a Christmas tree, and still people don't see it, right? Yeah. So again, yeah, we can simulate both in the truck. We also have a belly blade. I'm not really familiar with the belly blade, just the front and wing mounts, but yeah, we do have that ability to run a bunch of different scenarios.
So thank you so much, you guys. What we're hearing is be prepared, be patient, be safe out there. Make sure that you are keeping in touch with folks about your trip, journey management. We're going to wind down here, but I do want to give everyone an opportunity in case there was something you missed or wanted to add. And Cliff, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I got a few things here, just more geared towards the motoring public, and I'm a father of some young adult children, so this is something that I try to instill. Block heater cord. Make sure your block heater cord works before winter comes. There's a few ways that you can do that. Just plug it in and listen to it on a quiet evening. You can hear it wind up. Put it in snow and then plug it in. If it sparks, it works. That kind of stuff. Make sure your battery's in good condition. If there's any corrosion on it, clean it off. Do a load test on it if need be. But if your battery is weak at all, when it gets to be minus 25, minus 30, that's when you're going to really find out that it's not a good battery. So it's best to do it before it gets too cold. Rob and I had a big discussion on tires yesterday. If your tires are not good for the weather, then please, you got to get them changed out. Windshield washer fluid. Some people are very frugal, and in the summers they run water in their tanks, in their reservoirs. Yeah, you might want to get that changed out, because you're going to be in a whole world of hurt when the first snowfall, and then you try to clean off your windshield and it's frozen. Make sure your wipers are good. Headlights. I live on an acreage outside of town, so I do a lot of rural driving. And if you have a really poor set of halogen headlights, then really you're just kind of setting yourself up for a disaster. So a good set of LEDs, or at least get a really good clear set of halogens at the least. Making sure all your lights work. I mean, there's nothing worse than in a snowstorm, or even when it's raining in the summer for that matter, turn your lights on. If your tail lights aren't working, or if one of your headlights isn't working, it's going to be harder for you, not to mention the people around you. They're not going to be able to see you quite as easy. And fuel. I mean, it's this is a tough one. I often am negligent of this myself. In the winter, try not to go below half a tank of fuel. I mean, everybody's granddad has told them this at one time or another. And I'm like that grumpy old man on his front porch right now, but don't go below a half a tank of fuel, because if something does happen, and like Doug said, you're sitting on the side of the road because of an avalanche for sometimes over a day, you're going to want fuel. So,
Have you had experience with that, Cliff?
Yeah, I might have once or twice.
Going to retitle today to the Dad Podcast, but let's move on to Doug. Anything to add on your side?
Well, yeah, for sure. Just the point on the fuel, Cliff, it's also a good pre-trip reminder to check both tanks, the level of both fuel tanks on either side. I've had it where I've not done that, and I've had a crossover line freeze between the two tanks, suck one of the tanks dry, and my gauges show that I had lots of fuel, and I ran out as a result. So making sure that, again, you're dumping your air in your tanks, you're checking your fuel as a driver. Really, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're ready for the trip. And I used to run northern Yukon. I used to run groceries up there, and you'd be surprised at the amount of times I came across someone that was in trouble that had nothing with them. No tools, no warm clothes. It's in the middle of the night. We know groceries don't stop, so you're driving a lot at night, and you could travel 4 or 5 hours without passing a soul. So leaving from your destination without the tools that you need, the warm clothes, all those things is just playing Russian roulette. So just a reminder, be prepared. Again, if you have to pull over, stop. Best way to keep the customers happy is to communicate, right? If you just pull over and don't tell anybody, and the roads are bad, but you don't communicate, you failed on that load, you failed your customer, you feel not so good about that. So if you get ahead of that, phone in dispatch, here's where I'm at. I'm going to be down for 4 or 5 hours. I'll call you when I'm back up and running. Dispatch relays that to the customer. People understand, right? People know it's winter. Those customers drove to work no different than you did this morning. When it's blowing snow and it's miserable, it took them an extra half an hour to get to work. So they understand it, but just communicate it. So that's what I'll end on.
Great. Thank you, Doug. And anything from you, Rob?
Yeah, I'm going to, again, jump onto what Cliff had said and just add my own take. Keep your headlights clean, right? You do have a spare jug of washer fluid in your vehicle, right? So if you've got a spare jug of washer fluid and a roll of paper towels, you can easily clean those lights off when you're pulled over onto a nice safe area. In terms of washer fluid, like I said, keep that spare jug with you as well. I'm a big fan of Rain-X. I'm not in any way sponsored by Rain-X, but I find that Rain-X has the de-icer in it, which helps keep the blades from caking up as much as they do. And another one with Cliff on the headlights too. Yeah, you got daytime running lights in your car, but understand that daytime running lights generally do not light up taillights at all. So you can see your dashboard, you can see the road in front of you, but you're just a little black hole in the distance from behind at night. So again, make sure, like Cliff said, switch your headlights on manually. Oh, I have automatic headlights. Automatic headlights will not kick in a fog or in a snowstorm. Turn your headlights on manually. Make sure you're visible from the back as well. So, and that's about all I had for that.
I just want to say I thought I knew a little bit about this, but you guys have really opened my eyes. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your wealth of knowledge and experience today. So thank you. And for our Steering Change listeners, if you have any further questions on today's episode or suggestions of your own, feel free to hit us up on our DMs on AMTA_CA on X or Alberta Motor Transport Association on LinkedIn and Facebook. Or you can even shoot us an email at media@amta.ca. We also mentioned some resources such as Alberta 511 and AMTA snowplow videos in conjunction with Volker Stevin, so we'll be including those details and more in our show notes. Be sure to check those out. And stay tuned for next time, as Doug and myself will be debuting a 4-episode special, Steering Change Road to Wellness, covering all aspects from physical health to mental health to safety technology when it comes to commercial transportation. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. You've just heard from him today. He's number 1 in our hearts and number 2 on the radio. Rob Destree and I are going to break down the finalist of the Best Big Rig Movie bracket ever. Rob.
Okay, so we're into the final round of the Big Rig Bracket Challenge. And Kelsey, I would insert a drum roll here if I had one. Tear the Band-Aid off.
Ripping the Band-Aid, and between maximum overdrive and breaker, ! Breaker, ! The winner is Chuck Norris. Who else but Chuck Norris would win an Alberta-focused AMTA podcast film bracket but Chuck Norris?
Agreed. A bit surprising, a bit shocking in my mind. Clearly the best movie didn't win. But anyways, so in my 30 seconds of research prior to this episode, Norris made a whopping $5,000 for that project. So I'm sure that made an indelible mark in 1977.
This was, one of Norris's first roles in the lead, and him in that blue van with the golden eagle and fighting guys in corrals with stallions tossing their manes about was pretty epic. I will say, from a personal standpoint, if for entertainment value, Maximum Overdrive would be my go-to. But from what we were trying to achieve here, just films about drivers and about the trade, as out of the ordinary and Hollywood-like they might be, Breaker did have more of that sense of camaraderie between drivers supporting drivers. So yeah, I'm pleased with this. I know that you're a bit hurt that Smokey didn't even make it into the final.
I know, it's terrible. But yeah, to be fair again, so a quote from Chuck Norris: "I didn't know anything when I made that movie," said Norris. "We shot it in just 11 days. That shows. But it was amazing. People loved it anyways. It's a down-home kind of movie. It's still my dad's favorite. I want to become as big in the movie industry as I've been in the karate industry," said Norris in 1977. "I know I can do it because I have the faith to do it." So not only did he go on to bigger and better things, he has become a meme unto himself. So congratulations, Chuck Norris and the crew from Breaker! Breaker! Final thoughts, Kels?
Yeah, high five, Walker, Texas Ranger. Good on ya. And thank you to you, listeners of the Steering Change podcast, and our friends on our social media channels for voting. I don't want to speak for Rob, but this has been a lot of fun. And we'll likely be doing it next summer, so stay tuned for the Best Big Rig Movie Ever Part 2.
Yeah, I agree. This has been a blast. I like movies. You like movies. Get into the older movies and just seeing the change between how things were done back then and how they're done now. Peter Fonda doing his own stunts in whatever. What was that one? Well, it wasn't White Line Fever. That was Jan Michael Vincent, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jan Michael Vincent was White Line Fever.
Drawing a blank. Same here. That's how memorable some of these movies were. But again, yeah, it's always nice to go back into the archives and see what's
Over the Top.
Was it Over the Top? Nope, that was Stallone.
Oh gosh, you're right.
That was the arm wrestling 80s workout montage movie.
We're just running off the rails now.
We totally off the rails. So don't take anything we say as being movie critics. We clearly don't know what we're talking about. But thank you, dear listeners. We've enjoyed this, and we're looking forward to doing it again.
Hello, listeners of the Steering Change podcast. Join me, Kelsey Hipkin, AMTA's Doug Walton, and many special guests October 25th through December 6th for a special edition 4-part series, Road to Wellness. These episodes are dedicated to the health and well-being of the commercial drivers who keep goods on the move 24/7. We'll tackle everything from physical and mental health to safety technology, covering practical tips, expert insights, and inspiring stories from fellow drivers and the people who make safety and wellness on the road a priority. Buckle up and let's travel the road to wellness together.
Thank you for listening to this episode of AMTA's Steering Change podcast. The views expressed by guests of the Steering Change podcast are their own and may not reflect the views of AMTA, its hosts, or sponsors. Do you have a question that you would like answered on an upcoming episode of the Steering Change podcast? We want to hear from you. To submit a question to the Steering Change Mailbag, hit up our DMs on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram with the hashtag Steering Change, and your question will be answered either live on the podcast or by one of our SMEs here at AMTA. We ask that you share this episode with those in your network that could benefit from what we discussed today, and make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you can be notified when future episodes are released. You can learn more about us and our mission by visiting www.amta.ca. Now get out there and have a safe day.